All right, guys, we're back. Another Modified Rides podcast. Today's guest, I was going to say he's kind of new to the scene, hadn't been around much, but you on YouTube would already know that that's not true. Today, I have someone that's made such a huge name in the automotive uh, content scene, whether it's magazines, TV, or whatever. Today, I have Mike Finnegan. What's going on, Mike?
Good morning.
So I worked with Mike some back in the I guess it was Mini Trucking days, back when he was at Mini Trucking Magazine. So, and I've been trying to get him on for a while, but he seems to have his hands full with quite a few things. So tell us what's been going on lately.
Yeah, and I apologize about that. The social media thing is overwhelming some days, especially DMs. I a good example was this morning. Like 5 different people were like, some dude with a Camaro or Corvette golf cart body is trying to get a hold of you, and I'm like, man, I don't know, And then I went back through Instagram and Facebook and even my email, and I'm like, oh, sure enough, this dude's emailed me like 6 times. Um, and it's just hard to balance all of that with real life, as I like to think of it. So yeah,
Well,
sorry about that.
well, I guess let's go back to what I always start early. So what got you started in the automotive craze early? Because you grew up as an East Coaster, right?
No. I was born in California, and
Okay,
I lived there until I graduated high school, and then my folks moved to New York. And
gotcha.
I stayed in California for probably another year when they were gone because I just didn't want to go. And finally, I got tired of being broke, and I lived in the third car garage of a family friend. And so, on the rare occasion when it rained, my Home Depot AstroTurf carpet in my garage house would get wet, and I'd have to drag it outside and hang it up and dry it out. And eventually, I was as broke as it gets while still trying to be part of the mini trucking scene. I remember it's funny, those same people I knew back then are people I still know now. Like I bought my first set of custom wheels for my Toyota mini truck from a guy named Gary Bell. And Gary owned the first body drop mini truck I ever saw in my life.
Yeah.
And he's huge in the car audio scene still to this day. He's got a company called Define Concepts, and he still does high-end car audio stuff. And neither one of us, I don't think either one of us have been to a mini truck show in a long time, but we just still associate with all the same people. Like,
Yeah.
all those, it's wild. All the mini truckers I know that are still in my life, like my friend Opie, is like the national sales manager for Hedman Headers and Transtapt, and my friend the Captain, still in car audio. Like,
Yeah.
it's cool to see all these people that have just grown up from partying their asses off at truck runs to doing big things. So it's fun to just watch from the sidelines.
So what got you hooked into custom vehicles as a kid?
It really was television. Actually, before that, it was remote control cars. When I was a kid, I rode BMX and I skateboarded, and then when I got my first RC car, that was when I really started taking things apart and trying to understand them. And there was an RC car that I could never afford as a kid, but that was like the one. It was called a Team Associated RC10, and it had a gold pan and independent suspension and was fast and won everything. And so for me, that was the car. And I didn't save the money for one of those until I was in high school. And so it was really taking apart remote control cars kind of made me understand things. And then watching television shows like the Dukes of Hazzard and Knight Rider and the A-Team, where cars were like a big deal in all those shows, that was really what did it. Once I realized these things were real, and apparently you could jump a Charger and it would survive. And I was
TV magic.
yeah. And it was at that moment that I think I was 14 when I told my dad I wanted a car, and he's like, get a job. And so I quit playing sports and got a job bagging groceries when I was 15 to save the money to buy my first car. And I don't know that, I don't think he expected me to quit sports, because I really liked playing sports as a kid. I played travel soccer and basketball, and just, I loved it all, but I really wanted to drive, like in the worst way possible. Like I was the kid that on my 16th birthday, I was at the DMV to take my driver's test.
I was too, waiting on them to open.
Yeah, yeah, and and as soon as I got my car, it was like, where can I go with this thing? Like I would be at Tower Records at midnight waiting for a new Beastie Boys album to come out. I would drive to concerts. I would just go. I would go to junkyards. Like my Camaro, my first car was a '76 Camaro, and I remember I think it had a Quadrajet on it when I got it, and I didn't know anything about anything. I just know a Holly 4-barrel looked cooler, and it made the motor taller a little bit. If you put a single plane intake on it, the motor looked even taller. So I
Yeah.
went to the junkyard and bought that stuff and put it on, and made the car run worse, but it looked cooler.
And no one had taught you how to work on cars. You just kind of figured it out on your own.
Yeah, my dad wasn't a car guy. I don't think he owned a used car when I was a kid. He had a job that gave him a company car, so he would have a boring, Chevy Celebrity or something like that, some sort of Oldsmobile Buick, 4-door, just commuter kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so I was a huge disappointment to him growing up because I would spend all my money on car parts, and I didn't save anything. And more than once, he was like, "If you would just stop screwing around with cars, you could own a home." And I was like, "What am I gonna do with a house, man? Like,
Can't drive a house.
I can't raise a house. Like, what am I supposed to do with this, Dad?" And as usual, our dads, they're right to a certain degree, and I probably financially would have been better off not doing what I did, but had I not done what I did, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today.
Yeah.
So
When did you get into the modifying stuff more than just the junkyard stuff? Cause I know you had your Toyota. So what transitioned you from that Camaro to the Toyota?
So I totaled the Camaro I think it was my junior year of high school. Junior or senior year of high school, I forget which. And I crashed that car, ended up in a Honda CRX.
I
And
had
it
one
was
of those.
yeah, it was cool. It was 89, I think.
Mine was an 88. Courtney actually shot it for mini trucking. So
Really?
yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep.
Cool.
Shot it back in at Nopi 98. That 1 year that him and Lance were running cars one per issue.
Yeah. There were some cool cars in that whole stretch. Like I remember there was a Ford Escort, green and silver one that was in there. That was really cool. I don't remember if Kevin Whipp's car was ever in mini truck, and I just remember seeing it online at that time, the Bad Apple or whatever it was
I
called.
think that was when it was in Euro and everything.
Yeah, that thing. I remember I liked all of it. That was the thing, is there wasn't anything for me. Cool wasn't really a thing. I just liked everything. So I would read Import Tuner, I would read Mini Truckin', I'd read Off Road, Hot Rod. I read everything and just kind of just took a little bit from everything, and I didn't care what kind of car show it was. I would go to it. It was so fun. And I totally went off track. Sorry, what were we talking about?
How you went from the Camaro to the Toyota?
Oh yeah. So I graduated high school, got a CRX, was driving that around. That was fun. I put bass in the back of it and did the normal stuff like an air intake and a header. And then my best friend from high school, Shane Strom, had built this 71 240Z, and I loved that car. He built it in high school, and just after high school, it got a dent in one fender, and that was enough for him to be over it. He was going to sell it. So I hurried up and sold my CRX, bought his 240, and just loved that car. It was so cool. And that thing on like a Tuesday got stolen out of the parking lot of the grocery store I was working at. And I remember going out there because it was my turn to bring in the carts and just going, "Where's my car?" And I was in denial. I walked around for half an hour thinking I forgot where I parked it, and finally realized, it's gone. And they found it, I think, the next day, just totally stripped down in Compton, and it got towed back to my house. And it was a weird deal because it got stripped and replaced with other crappy Z parts. Like it had 300 ZX wheels on it and the steering wheel out of a later model Z, and And I could have fixed that car 100%. It didn't get trashed really. It just got stripped and most all the parts got replaced. But
I've never heard of someone stealing a car and replacing parts on it though.
yeah, like whoever ripped off my car had a Z and just, I guess to keep the car mobile, like put their wheels on it and just somehow the cops found it. I don't know. But it got drugged back to my parents' house. And I remember like I didn't even want to get in it. Once I looked at it and there were fingerprints all over it. And I was like, I don't even want to get in this car. There's something about it. I just couldn't deal with the fact that it got stolen and somebody else messed with it. And at that time, my brother and my dad and I were putting together a whale tail wide body Z car for him. And this is one of those hard lessons you never forget. I remember saying to my brother, I'm like, hey, look, your dash is trashed. Mine's good. You know, you need this, this, and that. I'm not fixing my car. You can have everything off of it. So we swapped dashes in the cars, and both cars were sitting in the street for like a week in front of my parents' house when one of the neighbors called the cops. The cops came, realized the VINs had switched from one car to another, which we didn't even think about, you
You're
know,
swapping
and
the dash.
yeah, and so they impounded both cars. And by the time my parents figured out where the cars went, the impound fees were pretty high, and in my parents' opinion, were higher than the value of the cars. So both Z's just, they were like, we're sick of you guys screwing around with old cars, you know, enough's enough. So they left the Z's at the junkyard or the impound lot or whatever it was. And so it was really my parents that were like, stop screwing around with old cars, get something reliable. So I went to Longo Toyota in El Monte, California, and bought a brand new 94 Toyota mini truck for $7,600, I think. Totally stripped. Like the bumper was optional. It had crank windows, no AC, and it didn't have power steering. It was the cheapest truck I could afford.
I wish they still made vehicles at that price.
Oh, it was fun. It was $180, you know, a month, which I could barely afford because I was still bagging groceries at the time. And that was the start of it because I was installing after bagging groceries. I took my new truck to Circuit City to get a car alarm put in because I just had a car stolen. And this
Yeah.
was the nicest thing I'd ever have. And I went into Circuit City and walked out of there with a job, which was weird. Like they offered me a job, and I'm like, I'm paying you to install this, you know, alarm. I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, oh, we have a whole training program. We'll train you, and you know, it'll be fine. I was like, okay. So I get a job at Circuit City, and I start learning how to install head units and speakers and amps and car alarms. And one of the guys that worked there, Dan, his roommate was Gary Bell. And so I go over to Dan's apartment one night and I see this bagged and body dropped yellow Toyota mini truck in a carport, and they're welding on it. They're wrenching on it in a carport, and my mind's just blown. I was like, what is this thing? You know, and you're like, it's the same thing you got, just, you know, we've just done things to it.
Well, cooler.
And they had a car club. It was called Drop Zone. And they had named the car club after a Wesley Snipes movie called Drop Zone. and they were super cool. Like I had a completely stock blue Toyota mini truck, and they let me in their club, and I'll never forget it. A couple of them, a guy named Lucas and another dude, I forget his name, came to Circuit City, took my truck, brought it back the next day with the torsion bars cranked down, 4-inch blocks in the back on stock shocks and stock tires. And I just saw it, and I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen, you know? But then I had to drive it home, and it nearly killed me. Like it was hammered, and the tires rubbed the inner fenders, and the shocks were completely bottomed out. And every bump on the 405 it would hit, it would try to change lanes on me. Like it was the sketchiest drive I've ever had on my way home. But when I got home, I just sat on my butt in the driveway and stared at it, and I could not stop staring at it. I just thought, this lowered truck is the coolest thing ever.
So it's worth having the carriage ride to it then.
Oh, absolutely. You know, because then I got to go to it was maybe my second Drop Zone car club meeting. I got to go there, and I had a lowered truck, you know, and it was because those guys back then, they were like, hell yeah, we want a bigger club. We'll help you work on your truck. They didn't even charge me. And, and there were 4 blue Toyota mini trucks in that club at that time. You know? Like we literally had carbon copies of each one, except everyone was modded a little more. This
Yeah.
guy had air shocks. This guy just had 15s. This guy had 16s. Like there was a guy with Probe GT wheels in there back in '94. Like there was, stuff was happening, and I just couldn't wait to save up money to go do that stuff. Like I pretty much stopped eating back then. I was on the Wendy's 99-cent value menu to save up enough money to buy my first set of wheels from Gary Bell. Like,
Another one of those. I wish those prices were still around.
oh man, yeah, I bought a hamburger meal yesterday and it was $13, and I was like, damn, and it was a really good time to be a mini trucker because stuff was just evolving so quickly. Like Mini Truck and Mag ran the first article of Gendro body dropping a truck. Like,
And where were you at this time? What part of California?
I lived in that garage in Brea, and I worked in Laguna Hills.
So you were still pretty much in the heart of the mini truck revolution, I guess.
Yeah, like I didn't know Courtney back then. I didn't know where Mini Truck and Magazine was made back then. I was just in this bubble of South Orange County, just hanging out with mini truckers, and they took me to my first truck run, which might have been West Coast Nats. No, it was Spring Splash. Um, yeah, I went to Spring Splash '94, which just blew my mind again. I was like, oh my God, like look at all these trucks that are like mine, and people just partying their asses off at a campground, and no one's going to jail, and just like it. Oh, I'm sure somebody went to jail, but but it was so fun. I got de-virginized as a mini trucker at that run. Like it was the second night. I'd been sleeping under my tonneau cover, hiding every night because I knew it was coming. I'd heard stories. So every night when it was time to go to sleep, I just hid in the bed of my truck, And then one night, it's like the second or third night, I never even made it to bed. They just grabbed my ass. Like they made sure they got me early, and they wrapped me in saran wrap and drug me around to every campsite. And I was covered in condiments, drunk off my ass.
I don't think they do that at shows anymore. I don't think the hazing like that is a thing anymore. I've not seen anybody saran wrapped to a telephone pole in a long time.
I don't know. I mean, I admittedly I haven't been to one in a while, but it was fun. I mean, I'm for sure it's probably dangerous, but I got them back. We were all sleeping in one giant tent, or at least they were. So after I was covered in crap, I just crawled into their tent, passed out, and oh my God, the smell! It was so nasty, dude. Oh man, it made a mess too. But yeah, like it was a great time to be a mini trucker back then. It seemed like every weekend there was somewhere to go, something to do, somewhere to cruise, new friends to make. It was just a killer time.
Yeah.
And everyone knew each other. And so oddly enough, I wasn't even there that long as a mini trucker. After about a year, I was broke. And so I threw everything I owned in my mini truck. And at that point, it had 4-wheel air shocks and a scuba tank with no regulator on it, which is a bad idea, by the way. I'll back up a little bit. My girlfriend and I used to cruise Main Street in Huntington Beach, and we had Schrader valves that were teed to the front air shocks, the rear air shocks. And it was her job. I forget which block we'd start on, but it took a long time to lower the truck. So about 3 blocks before we'd get to where we wanted to be on Main Street, she'd stick 2 pencils in the Schrader valves and start lowering the truck. And then right around the time I got to where everybody was hanging out, it would be dragging the transmission cross member. And then it was her job to put the Schrader valve from the air tank on one of them and just barely crack the valve open on the bottle. There was no regulator. And this truck would lift so fast with little 1/8-inch plastic airline. But if she didn't close it fast enough, it would be like a shotgun went off. She'd explode the Rancho air shocks, which happened more than once. And then I'd be stuck. Like the truck wouldn't even move.
I remember I had in my CRX, I had a scuba tank, and trying to go to the scuba shop, explain to them why you need air. And they're like, oh, you got to be dive certified to have this tank filled. Yep. I'm like, I'm not diving. It's like, I'm using it for my car.
Yeah. I kept having to switch shops because I would return the air shocks and they'd be like, I'd go to 4-wheel parts and return them. And they'd exchange them a couple times and then they'd just, lose patience with me. But the dive shops would get bent and I would have to switch because they'd only fill it twice. Then they'd be like, what are you doing with this? And they'd stop filling it. And so I'll never forget, like I was there about a year with my air shocks. And then when it was time to move to New York, about halfway across the country, everything leaked and I ran out of air. Um, and so I bought like a bicycle electric plug in the cigarette lighter air pump to lift up the shocks, burned out 2 or 3 of those driving cross country. And just the last 300 or 400 miles, I just drove with the axle hitting the frame rails because it wasn't C notched back then. Just bang, 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 all the way to New York. Yeah. So I lived in New York about, I think I was on a 6-year plan to get my AA in community college back then. Like I was going to college. I didn't even know why.
Yeah.
I think you're supposed to. And so I did. I hadn't taken the SATs or, in high school, I think the only time I ever saw my guidance counselor was a couple times I got into a fight. Like I was not a career person. It just wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't even on my radar. And the last year I lived there, I was at a truck show with the dudes from Severed Ties, New York, and I run into Courtney Halliwell, and I didn't know him. I knew his name, but I hadn't even seen a picture of him, I think, in mini trucking
Yeah.
at that point.
You just seen the byline with his name in it.
Yeah, and he's walking around with a camera, and he's taking some pictures of our trucks, which back then was massive. Like if you got a black and white photo of your truck in New York in Mini Trucking Magazine, oh my god, dude, that's the greatest thing ever.
Because there wasn't a lot of East Coast or Northeast shows like that back then.
No, you had like Low Rollers and Magnetic Mini Bash and the Jersey Jambo. There wasn't a lot. Like we would drive from New York down to Tennessee, Pigeon Forge or
Yeah.
Indy, because that's where most of the good trucks were at. Like I want to say, at least at the time, like New York was probably 3 to 5 years behind the West Coast in terms of the mods of trucks.
Yeah.
We'd see it in mini trucking first after it already happened in California, and then we'd try to emulate it. So like music was different in New York for sure. The mini trucks were different for sure. And it's not like California was better. It's just they had people innovating stuff that wasn't even like, I'll never forget when we saw airbags in Mini Trucking Magazine. My friend Sean Weber called Airlift and told them what we wanted to do. And they're like, we make stuff for big rigs. What are you even talking about? They're like, yeah, we want to put that on our mini truck. And they wouldn't even sell the stuff to Sean at first because they were like, this doesn't sound safe at all. And, well, anyway, long story short, I'm at a mini truck show. I see Courtney and I introduced myself and I asked him what he was doing. And he's like, well, I go to truck shows and I take pictures and I go home and I write about them and I put them in Mini Trucking Magazine. And I was like, they pay you for that? He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, that is the greatest job ever. How do I get that job? And to his credit, he was super cool. He coached me through my last semester of college, like via email. He told me what classes to take. And the moment I graduated, I packed up everything I owned because I just wasn't into the weather in New York and headed west. And I run into Mike Self at Texas Heatwave, who tells me he's about to quit mini trucking. I don't even think Lance knew it at the time. And I was like, hold up, don't quit. Just wait a week. Let me get there, then quit, And
what year was this?
This was 2000.
Okay.
And so I make this gnarly cross-country trip from New York to California.
If I remember right, you were driving a motorhome with your Toyota and a trailer behind it, right?
Yeah. I think I did write about it in Mini Trucking.
Yeah.
And it was the most ridiculous road trip I've ever been a part of in my life. Like it would take an hour to tell you all the crap that happened on that road trip. Like the first night,
not good stuff.
No, well, I mean, it's funny now to me in hindsight, but at the time, like my girlfriend at the time, this was supposed to be a vacation for us. We're going to see some sights. We're going to camp out. And it was probably romantic in her eyes. My only goal was to hit truck shows on the way there. I'll never forget, like my parents said, here's this motorhome. It's only got 40,000 miles on it. We're going to give this to you so you can try to survive and, live in it. I'm like, okay, cool. So my girlfriend and I leave New York, and like an hour into the road trip, this thing breaks a U-joint on the highway and we're just stranded, and it's dark. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, we got a motorhome. We'll just sleep in it, So we crawl up on the top bunk It's one of those cab over RV type deals, and we're
Yeah.
up there asleep, and then just bang on the door. It's the cops. They're like, "You can't sleep here," and I'm like, "Well, unless you got a big ass tow truck, I don't know what to do, bro. Like, it won't move." And so they leave. You know, they tell us it's dangerous, and we leave, and they leave. And like half an hour later, I wake up, I'm wet, and I'm like, "Did I just piss myself?" No, it's raining, and the roof's leaking all over us. So then we retreat from that bunk down to the couch, the skinny ass couch. Both of us are on it. There's no room because all our worldly possessions are crammed into this motorhome, you know, and my mini truck's behind it on a trailer. And then we're like, why are we itching, you know? Well, because the thing's infested with ants and we don't know it, you know. It had been parked under a tree at my parents' house, and I guess from the tree being on the roof, the ants just climbed on, got in the roof, and the whole thing was covered in ants. All our food covered in ants, you
Maybe
know.
that's why your parents gave it to you, because they didn't want to deal with it.
I don't know. And so the next morning I wake up and I thumb it for like 20 minutes and there's nobody. It's weird. There's nobody coming by. And it's, as it turns out, it's because we're in Amish country and I don't even know it. We're somewhere in Pennsylvania in Amish country. And there's just no cars coming by. And so I pull the Toyota off the trailer and it's backwards because it was like a heavy equipment trailer. And if I've loaded it on with the engine at the front of the trailer, it made the motorhome pop wheelies when it hit bumps in the road. So I unload the Toyota backwards, facing horse and buggies coming and just mayhem. And I end up finding a Ford dealer because it was a Ford motorhome down the road, buy a U joint, change it. And over the course of the next few days, it would just blow up the next U joint in the drive shaft because it was way overloaded. This trailer, I bought this trailer right before I moved. And I didn't know anything about trailers, but it was like a heavy equipment trailer, not a car trailer. And I guess it was too much. And so it just started blowing up U joints to this three-peat drive shaft. And so it broke every one of them as we drove cross country. We got to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, went to take the Toyota off the trailer, which was going to be a huge deal for me because I finally had a mini truck that was bagged, body drop, shaved, painted. Like it was pretty cool.
You had the graphics on it then, didn't you?
No.
It's just blue.
I had bagged and body dropped it in my parents' garage. This shop in Middletown, New York called Eurocraft Collision painted it Porsche Riviera blue. And it was just one color. My girlfriend's uncle had done the interior in it. Like, it was a pretty damn nice truck. And I was so excited to show it off at Mini Truck Nats, except it broke a ball joint when it was laid out on the trailer getting towed all the way to Pigeon Forge. It broke a ball joint. The truck was so new, no one stocked it. Not even the Toyota dealer had a ball joint for a 97 Tacoma. It was weird. And so the truck was stuck on the trailer at the hotel during Mini Nats. I was so pissed, dude. Like, all that hard work, I couldn't show it to anybody, you know. A few people might have seen it at the hotel parking lot, but it never made it to a truck show. So then I meet this guy Josh Long, who's in Severed Ties in Tennessee, and
Yep.
he's like, "Bring it by my shop when you get to Tennessee. I'll get a ball joint. We'll fix it." And when we got there, a couple things happened, which was weird. We were hanging out at a Captain D's when we got into town because there was a car cruise going on. And then that night, someone got murdered at the Captain D's. And this is a really small town. So we go to Josh's, find out about the murder. Everyone's like looking at the new people who just showed up in town. I'm like, let me get out of here. And Josh is like, you should not leave just now. You know, like it'll look bad. Hey, bring your truck in and we'll fix it. So we get it inside his shop, fix the ball joint. But while we're there, we realize the airbag mounts are tearing the frame rails of the truck because the frame rails are so thin. And Josh is like, we need to fix that. And so we decide, okay, we'll fix it. We'll rebag the front end. And then he's like, you know, your step notch is cool, but it'd be a lot cooler if we bent some tubes and added some stuff in it. And I didn't have a tube bender when I step notched it, so it was just straight bars for a cross member. And I'm like, yeah, cool, that sounds good. Next thing you know, he's bending a Severed Ties diamond into the tube work. And my girlfriend's just tapping her foot, like, what are we doing here? We're now on day 3, you know? And then I don't know what happened, but we took the cab of the truck off the frame while we were there. I think because we had painted the rear, we had painted the front. Josh is like, you can't have the middle not painted. So I swear to God, my girlfriend would nearly broke up with me. She probably did because what was supposed to be one day of fixing my truck turned into like 5 days of modding it at Josh's shop.
But you didn't have any kind of time frame of where you had to be where for the most part.
No, we were just going. Me and her were just going to California. She was gonna enroll in college, and I was gonna try to get a job at Mini Trucking, and so, but we were starting. I was starting to run out of money at this point, and by the time we got to Texas for Texas Heatwave, I was out of money. Like the motorhome got worse gas mileage than I budgeted for. Like it was getting 3 miles to the gallon, and so I quickly went through all of the money I had, and we got to Texas Heatwave, and the first thing we did was roll up to the Holiday Inn, unload the truck from the trailer, and then park it in front of the lobby, go inside to check in. And by the time I came back out from checking in, somebody had broke into the Tacoma and stole the whole stereo system out of it, like in the lobby of the hotel. And I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. I have no money. My stereo's gone. Let's just go to the truck show. Well, it's like 105 degrees out. And I learned about Texas heat and private airlines don't work. So on the way to the truck show, now I'm blowing airlines on this truck, so I'm broke. My stereo's gone. The airlines are melting coming out of the compressor. Thank God for the Severed Ties guys in Texas, because they were the ones that were like, let's replumb it in copper. That's what we do here because of the heat. I was like, okay. Yeah. And then by the end of the show, word had gotten around. I was out of money. And they took up a collection to get me gas money to get this motorhome to California. And so without the guys in Severed Ties, Texas, I never would have made it. And we coasted.
No, but you hadn't confirmed that you were getting that job. That was just kind of one of those ones you were going in hopes of getting it.
Yeah, I didn't have a job, and I'd run out of money. Flat out run out of money. And so the Severed Ties guys got us enough money to get us to Blythe, California, where we blew our last U-joint. In the parking lot of an auto parts store, which is funny. And again, we're like, well, we're in a motorhome. We'll just sleep here tonight. And when the auto parts store opens in the morning, I'll go get a U-joint. But we woke up extra early that morning because they were repaving the parking lot, and my broke down motorhome was stopping the whole production of that deal there. So they're banging on our door telling us to move, and I'm like, I can't, man. I'm stuck here until they open. So anyway, we fixed the motorhome. We make it to California. First thing I do is go find Courtney, because through all this time, he's like, just get here. I now work at Street Trucks. I can't hire you, but you guys can stay with us. So we ended up living in that motorhome in front of Courtney's house for, I don't even know how long. Might have been 2 months before I had gotten the job at Mini Truck and gotten a paycheck and gotten into an apartment. And then that became a whole game of move the motorhome every day from one grocery store parking lot to another, because we had nowhere to keep it, and people were constantly stealing the gas out of it, when it sat in grocery store parking lots. And
do you remember what they hired you on as at Mini Trucking, your first job?
Yeah. Kelvin Wilson, great dude, hired me to work for Lance. I was an associate editor, and I made $23,000 a year, I think.
Well, that's the thing. Me and Mike Alexander was talking about, that the 24 rule, where they wanted you to be 24 years old, make 24 grand a year, and work 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and what they told me, what Kevin had told me was like, you're not going to get rich doing this, but you're going to have a lot of fun, and you'll get to play with your own truck. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but eventually I learned that advertisers are just going to throw parts at you left and right.
Yeah.
And not all of them you want, but like we turboed my Tacoma in Mini Trucking magazine. It never ran right, but it looked cool.
It looked good in pictures.
Yeah, it had no intercooler. There was no real good way to tune it, so it misfired. It pinged it, but it looked damn cool in pictures.
So how long were you at Mini Trucking?
I was not long. Might have been 2 years, I think. The cool thing about working for that company was we all worked in this building. We're all like little prairie dogs popping our heads up out of cubicles. And Lance had an office. My cube was right outside his office, but my cube was surrounded by guys that worked for other magazines. And so I got exposed to desert racing through Off-Road magazine. So I went to work there after Mini Trucking because I wanted to learn about that. The guys from Sport Truck were there. The guys from Truckin' were there. Four Wheeler. I met just lifelong friends, and got exposed to all these different genres, and they were cool with editors moving around
Yeah.
and going to different magazines. So I went to Off Road magazine. I was there. I wasn't there very long before the editor got fired, and I ended up somehow becoming the editor, and I shouldn't have been because I didn't know what I was doing. And after about 8 months of being the editor with no staff and no raise, I quit, and I left that company to go work for Hot Boat magazine. Um, and I worked there for probably 2 years, I guess, before they hired me back to come be the editor of Sport Truck magazine. And
I think you were at Sport Truck during the Havoc show in Kentucky, right?
yeah, that was John O'Neill's brain.
I remember you was there. Uh,
Eddie Sprecher was
John,
there.
everybody was there.
Yeah, yeah, that was in Kentucky at the
Yep.
convention center. I was about to say, I knew so little about any of this stuff that I remember pretty much the only reason I got the job was because I drove into the job interview with a mini truck, and the truck was so low and the driveway was so steep, it grabbed the roll pan and ripped the roll pan and tailgate skin on the truck. And
On your interview day.
on my interview day, I had a rough stretch of just weird things happening. And so I went in there. I think I went in there kind of fired up because I just trashed my truck, and I was like, dude, I better get this job, But I'll never forget. They gave me a roll of film and said, go out and shoot a feature on your own truck. And I might have had to write an article on it. I don't remember. But
Had you ever done any photography or anything at all at that point?
I took photography in college, but it was mostly learning to develop film and slides. And, it wasn't automotive photography at all. And I was not a very good photographer. I understood the basics, f-stops and aperture and all that, but as far as shooting it, developing it, seeing the results, and then going, here's what I need to change in my settings to make it look better the next time, that skill I didn't get until I went to work at Mini Truckin'. But I snapped one slide of film that got me the job, and I went down to Huntington Beach, photographed my truck, and the photos were just meh. But on the way back, I saw this restaurant, and the sign for it made me laugh, so I just shot a photo of it, and it said, fuck it, Thai food. And, apparently, between owning a mini truck and having a sense of humor about the sign is the reason Lance Martz hired me. I'm pretty sure that's what he told me. Because I was a mediocre writer, and I didn't know anything about taking photos. I really didn't. But in working for Mini Truckin', like, it was a volume thing. Like, when you went to a show, you needed to come back with like 10 features,
Yeah.
And so I would take notes. I would shoot somebody's truck, and I would bracket up and bracket down, my exposure, and I would take notes on what I did. So when I'd get back, they would develop the slides. I'd sit on a light table with a loop and look at them, and I would go, all right, well, that looks like crap. That looks okay. That looks like crap. And I just look at my notes at what I did, and I'd go back out and try it differently. And so I definitely got better. I was not nearly on the same level as anybody I worked with. Like, John O'Neill was outstanding.
Yep.
And it was never my goal to become a great photographer. What I was really interested in was visiting as many shops as I could to learn as much as I could about how to build the stuff. And then I spent all my money on tools. I never bought good photography equipment. I just kept buying tools because I couldn't afford to pay anybody to work on my stuff. I had to do it, and I wanted to do it. And so I think that might have been what set me on a different path than everybody else I worked with, is because everybody else I worked with was really into the magazine end of it. And I really wasn't. I was into, how do these things work? How do I build them? How do I learn everything I can,
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason I kept changing jobs is, after a couple of years of mini trucks, it was like, all right, well, this one's red and it's bagged and body dropped and it's on 19s or 20s or whatever, and this one's blue. And it started to get the same for me as the writer. It was rare that you got an article that was wildly different than the others. Having said that, that time is so valuable to me because it keeps coming full circle. Like, I'd say 6 months ago, I went to where were we? I ran into Kevin Shield, and I had photographed his truck. It was like one of the first things I ever photographed at Mini Truck, and I photographed his Isuzu. And we were at oh my god, I'm brain farting on his shop. What's his boss's name? Oh my god, I can't remember. They have a TV show. Bitch and Rides.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we were in Utah and we stopped by there to do some sort of crossover episode between our show and their show, and ran into Kevin, and I was like, I photographed your truck, dude, and so it was cool to reminisce about that because he still has the feature up on his wall that I wrote on his truck. And when I looked at it, I went, oh man, those photos are washed out. Those really suck. I'm sorry.
I do the same thing. I look at old stuff and I'm like, God, that looked good back then. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, I was like, I really wish I was better back then when I took pictures of your pride and joy.
So how long were you at the magazines? I know you, like you said, you'd bounce between the truck stuff and the boat stuff and all that, but how long were you working for magazines?
From 2000 until 2015.
Okay.
The last magazine I was at Hot Rod when I left, because the magazines had started nosediving around '08 in terms of how many they were selling.
Yeah.
And the video thing started taking off in about 2013. And I was, at the time I left Hot Rod, I was writing for a Hot Rod, I was doing Roadkill, and I was doing Hot Rod Garage all at the same time. And it was burning me out. I didn't have kids at that point yet. I was married, but I didn't have kids, and it was a lot. And so I definitely burned out. And so I told them, I'm like, hey, look, I need 2 of these jobs, but not 3 of these. And so I'm going to quit the magazine. And to be honest, that magazine, it was so well staffed. Everybody there was a better writer than I was. And so they didn't really need me. They had guys like Jesse Kaiser, Brandon Glogly, and Alana Schur, and they had David Freiberger. Rob Can was there, but he left before I did. They had real talent there, and so I didn't really have any guilt about quitting because they were fine.
I forgot that's where Brandon went after he left trucking.
Yeah. Well, Hot Rod was the dream job. Like,
Yeah.
that was as good as it gets in automotive journalism for custom stuff. I'm sure the other end of the spectrum, like Car and Driver or Motor Trend, if you're into new cars, that's where you want to go. That's the peak. But if you're into customizing stuff, Hot Rod was the big dog.
He's at what, Hemmings now or whatever?
Yeah.
So you said you was already doing some of the Roadkill stuff before you left the magazine.
Yeah, we were doing Roadkill for free for like.
So how did that become about? Like, where did that concept come from?
It's pretty simple. Like I went to work for Hot Rod. David Freiberger was the editor. They had been doing some video stuff on the Hot Rod YouTube channel, and Freiberger and I took a road trip and brought along 2 guys that worked in this fledgling video department. And we just filmed a couple of road trips we took. And another guy at the company, Angus McKenzie, saw those road trip videos and said, you're gonna put those on the Motor Trend channel, not the Hot Rod channel, and come up with a name, and you guys now have a show. And I didn't have a grasp of what that even meant, because all I knew was Monday through Friday, and on a lot of weekends we were making a magazine. And for the first 2 years of Roadkill, we were still doing that. Roadkill was an afterthought. It was, how do we cram in this thing in addition to all the other things we have to do, that actually pay us a salary.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, so I'm 13 years into this, and I've gone from making 24 grand as an associate editor to making a whopping $50,000 as a tech editor at Hot Rod, tech or associate, I don't remember, and making 2 TV shows. So, if you're out there watching this, it's not what you think it is.
You're not a millionaire at that point.
No, God, no. It wasn't until I decided to, I forgot how it went down. Basically, the company realized they had lightning in a bottle with Roadkill, And they didn't need to do this, but one day they just called me in the office and slid a contract in front of me. And because I think they were trying to sell Roadkill to a television network. And so they had to start paying us, and they did that. And I looked at this contract, and I don't know anything about anything, but I was like, this is awful. Like, this is genuinely scares the shit out of me. I'm not signing this. And so I hired an agent back then, which just screwed up everything because the agent didn't understand what a YouTube show was, and nobody did. Nobody knew how to monetize it. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody could understand how big it was. We could, because we would run into people in everyday life, and the comments were just, were flooded. So we understood how big it was getting. But at the
How
time,
far into it before you realized that this is going to be a hit, that the numbers started going crazy or whatever? Like, was it first couple episodes y'all did, or did it take a while?
I don't remember how long it took. In fact, I don't remember how long it took to have like an episode that hit 1 million views. I just remember all of a sudden there was a point where everything we uploaded would get 1 million views in like 3 or 4 days. It was wild. And at the time, I was on a BlackBerry. I couldn't even watch it. We had company Blackberries for sending emails. It was so early. It was the beginning of Instagram. It was I got a fan page on Facebook and didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know how that worked. Like it was the beginning of Facebook kind of. I remember once Roadkill came out, people just stopped or started asking me to be friends on Facebook. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. I just said yes to everybody. And so to this day, I have a Facebook page that I'm on it almost every day. And it's maxed out. There's 5,000 people on there, most of which I really don't know, but we're all friends on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then I started a fan page later when I realized, oh, this is a regular old thing. I can't just do this. I have to have room for more people. This is how little I knew about any of this stuff. I'll never forget it. I was sitting in my office near Johnny Lieberman from Motor Trend, and I joined TikTok. Someone told me about this new thing called TikTok, or not TikTok. Sorry, Twitter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, all right, cool. And it's 140 characters, and Johnny Lieberman and I are what I thought direct messaging each other or texting each other or something, except we weren't. And we're having a conversation about how a Volvo station wagon is not metal. And he's like, it's totally metal. And it's not metal, bro. And he's like, Scott Ian from Anthrax he drives one. And I remember in my brain reading some article about how he quit Anthrax, the band, and got replaced, and didn't fact check it at all. And I was like, Scott Ian hasn't been metal since he quit Anthrax. Next thing you know, Johnny Lieberman tags Scott Ian and it's like, Mike Finnegan says you're not metal and that you quit Anthrax. And Scott Ian's like, this dude's an idiot. I never quit Anthrax. I missed one show because I was sick, and I was like, oh hell. And that was when I realized the whole world is seeing everything we're saying to each other. And I was like, I really need a better grasp on all this social media stuff. I don't know what I'm doing, bro.
So where did the ideas come up in the beginning for the Roadkill stuff? You just throw shit together and hope for the best?
A lot of them are Freiberger. It was a unique relationship because he was my boss. So my job was he says, we're going to go on a road trip and do this thing. Cool. We're going to go on a road trip and do this thing. What do you want to build? Great. Let's build it. It wasn't until I left Hot Rod Magazine that he on paper wasn't my boss. And so then it got a little more collaborative. I just started pitching my own ideas. But if you look at that first season's probably all his cars. Because it was wild. He had like 40 cars, and none of them were really expensive cars. Like he had a Gremlin, he just had stuff that was relatively inexpensive, and he just stockpiled, and we would just use them for Roadkill episodes. And it was great. Without his cars and his ideas in the very beginning, the show never would have gone anywhere.
So you just had someone basically filming dudes being dudes in a garage and trying to tear stuff up and fix stuff. And
yeah, it was tiny. Like we had 2 camera people and no director really, and no producer, no crew, it was 2 guys. They would just follow us, and when we'd come home, one of them would stay behind to edit the episode, which is great because they were there. They knew everything that happened, and they'd bring a third guy with us, and then we go out with two other guys, and it was just tiny and raw, and there was no money. Like, we shared hotel rooms, we stayed in absolute shitholes. Like, it was a really wild time. Like, we did nutty things because we had no money and there was no time. So we would drive 500 miles, all night long in a crap box to get somewhere that we couldn't not make it.
Yeah.
In fact, we didn't, at the time we were all watching Street Fighter, and YouTube was cat videos and everything was a minute long or less. And so we didn't think anyone was going to watch a 30-minute show about two dudes with cars. So the very first thing we ever filmed was trying to go to Alaska in a ranchero, and we didn't make it. We failed. Like, we got stuck at the Grand Canyon. We never made it. And so we didn't air it right away because we didn't think anyone would watch it. And we hurried up and filmed another thing, which was flying to El Paso, buying a car and seeing if we could drive home to LA for $1,500. That's the first thing we aired. But then we were out of content because we were working on the magazine. So we had to air the Alaska debacle, and it aired, and all of a sudden no one cared we didn't make it. They were like, that really happened? Oh, and you're showing us that really happened. Oh, you failed. Oh, well, this is kind of funny, and because there was no script, and I think that's really the moment where you realized this is the formula. Show them everything, hide nothing, and they'll stick with you, as long as it's real. And so it was pretty early on that the recipe became obvious.
How long did it take between the YouTube time till you actually wound up on TV?
Oh, I don't know. Like, immediately, I'd say in the first year, there was someone at the company talking about selling it to a cable network, and it didn't happen. I think it's been sold, 2 or 3 times. I think the first sale happened, I don't know, 4 years after we started it. It wasn't that long. And nothing really changed for us. Like, every time it got sold, nothing really changed. Over the years, the production got bigger. We would have a director who wasn't really manning a camera. We would have a producer who was booking hotel rooms and, making sure we're on budget. We had a production assistant who would run and get parts because over the years, the amount of time we had to film an episode shrunk. And so, it wasn't always feasible for us to make 9 parts runs in one day because we still had to build the car. And so they would have an assistant go get the parts. And that, in my opinion, did change the nature of the show. It was the best it ever was in the very beginning, when it was just 2 dudes and no money. It was still great. Like, I still love doing it. Even when it ended, like at the time it ended, which was, I don't know, it's been about 6 months, I was still waking up in the middle of the night with weird ideas going, oh, what happens if we do this? I want to do this season, And so, now we'll just put those on YouTube,
So what was your favorite episode of everything y'all did? Do you have one thing that's like, that was the pinnacle of what we did?
It's probably not one thing. There's just moments, like the first time Stubby Bob did a wheelie, which we weren't expecting. I was like, holy crap.
I remember that out in the desert, that strip or whatever.
Yeah. The first time that happened, that was awesome. The time we took the Rotson to a 24 Hours of Lemons race and only made 24 laps and broke the crankshaft in half, that was memorable for me. When we got my 55 Chevy running and just jumped in it and drove to North Carolina from LA, that was wild and really fun.
It's not even fun in a new car. So
yeah. When we made it to Alaska, like when we finally made it, that was really cool. There's just, I don't know, there's just moments. It's moments more than anything than episodes. I don't remember most of the episodes, but by the time you guys saw them, I'd seen them in a rough edit process 3 times and never wanted to see them again. We were very lucky. Like, this show, because it was made in-house and the camera guys weren't necessarily car people and neither were the editors, we would sit in on the editing process to make sure stuff was factually correct. And that's something you don't find on a traditional TV show.
Yeah.
Normally an actor will come in and do their lines and that's it. They see it when the audience sees it. We saw every episode multiple times before anybody else saw it. And so because of that, once they would air, I don't like the sound of my own voice, first off, but I never went back and watched them. So I've forgotten a lot of the stuff we did. Now
So is
maybe
that all you were doing during that time? Is just the Roadkill stuff?
Roadkill and Hot Rod Garage. I did Hot Rod Garage for, I don't remember, 1 or 2 years. But I had, in the middle of all that, around 2015, my dad got ill. My family, we all moved to Georgia to be near him. And so once I moved to Georgia, that changed everything. I stopped doing Hot Rod Garage because I wasn't going to fly back for that crazy schedule.
Yeah.
And so around 2016, I launched my own YouTube channel as kind of like my fallback plan because we never owned Roadkill. You know, the company that owned Hot Rod Magazine owned Roadkill. And
Even though it was y'all's idea, you still never owned it.
Yeah, there's a lesson there, everybody. If you're out there and someone, you know, if you make something while under the employ of a media company, especially if you make it using their equipment, it's theirs. It's not yours. If you read your employment contract, everything we photographed and wrote while we were at Hot Rod was owned by the company that owned Hot Rod, including Roadkill. So there was always going to be a day when the lights would get shut off and it wouldn't be up to us. And so in 2016, I launched my own YouTube channel because that was my fallback plan. I was like, you know, at that point, we'd done Roadkill 3 or 4 years, and I was like, how long can this actually go? You know, turns out it can go 13 years, but then they just shut it off and don't tell you why. So I'm thankful that I launched the channel because at least I still have a job.
Yeah. So that's all you're doing now is the YouTube stuff for yourself?
Yeah. It's fun.
So I know we've all seen the buzz online where all the automotive shows on Motor Trend and everything basically got canned. Mm-hmm. What was that like? Someone that was your career at that point to be sorry, we can't use you anymore. Like, what was the outcome of that?
Well, it was one of those things I kind of had already been prepared for because every year they greenlight you for another season. Like, you had a contract and it was usually for 2 or 3 years, but the contract was for the company. It wasn't for you. They had the option of exercising. They had the ability to exercise an option for an additional season. At the end of every year, basically you're out of work unless they tell you you're doing it again. And so for the first 12 years, I just acted as if it was going to be over. I tell my wife, hey, this could be it, save some money. And so I always expected it. When it actually happened, it wasn't amazing. I basically had been asking for 3 or 4 months before it actually happened. Is this over? And nobody would tell us. And so we weren't able to film a proper goodbye episode. The last episode, for me personally, kind of sucked. My C10 ended up on fire, and the windshield of my 68 Charger got smashed in, and then that's it. Like, we were like on camera, we're like, hey, and maybe you'll see us fix this stuff in a future episode of Roadkill. But in our hearts, we're like, nah, probably not, And maybe a month after we filmed that episode last October, they finally called us and were like, yeah, it's over. And my only issue really with it is you don't know why. My guess is it wasn't making money, but nobody knows why.
Well, they canned every car show, didn't they?
Yeah. So, I had said we got sold 3 times. Well, the last time we got sold was to Warner Brothers Discovery.
Yeah.
And that's a massive company, huge. Right. And they make movies, and, my guess is that this little Motor Trend thing over in the corner was not a big enough moneymaker for them to bother with it. Because it wasn't just Roadkill. It was, all the shows, all the car shows.
Like, I talked to Jeremy Bumpus, he was saying that they cut his show a while back, I guess before yours got cut from Carfix.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Yeah. The year before they canceled some shows, and they started canceling shows that they weren't making in-house, I think a year ago. And then at the very end, it was the stuff that got made in-house by Motor Trend.
But what's the point of having a Motor Trend app and channel and all that if there's nothing motor related on it? Like, where did they go with all that?
Well, they got 13 years of a catalog that they can just keep rerunning, you
Oh
know.
yeah, not have to pay any for anything new.
Uh-uh. They don't have to pay us. They don't pay anybody. You know, they own all of it. There's no, it's not like the movies where everybody's got a deal where, you know, you're getting residuals or, you know, points or anything like that. It's
Your
just,
$27 check once a month, or
you're not getting that. No. You know, like I meet people every day. They're like, "Where's your goatee?" And I'm like, "Man, if you saw me with a goatee, that was 10 years ago." And you got a lot of catching up to. There's a lot of episodes you can still watch. Um, so yeah, like it, you know, it'll live on forever as far as I'm concerned until they stop rerunning it. You know, I don't believe the cable channel is going anywhere. And they've moved all the catalog to the Discovery app and Max. So it's out there. You're just gonna have to go somewhere else to watch it, I guess.
so since you started your channel in 16, I guess it grew to where when all this happened with Roadkill, you just said, well, this is profitable enough to continue and just follow in those steps.
On its own, it's not. But with sponsors, it will be. That'll be the thing going forward. Is I now have to hustle for sponsor dollars. Um, you know, well, if I want to continue making the same kind of content, if I want to keep racing and taking people on the adventures of going racing, yeah, it absolutely needs sponsor dollars. If I was to just sit in my garage every day and wrench, then I could probably survive on it. I only have one employee, you know, and a warehouse of cars. That's my overhead really. So if I keep it small and don't dream big, then yeah, we'll be fine. But that
I
doesn't.
guess if you've had the last 25 years to create that name and that brand behind you, like you've grown, like I said earlier in the podcast, you've grown to what a lot of us would have liked to have achieved. You know, us just being photographers and stuff, never thought, you know, one of our group's going to wind up being a TV star.
Yeah, I didn't either. And you know, Freiberger was really the driving force behind all that. You know, it was his idea to film road trips, and um, it was never, none of that was my goal. All I ever wanted to do was go racing. That was it. I just wanted to be better at building things and fabricating things and then driving them. It was literally right place, right time. That's the only reason I'm here. That, and I just never said no. You know, that was a big thing. Was it just whatever crazy thing someone put in front of me, if it wasn't going to kill me or put me in jail, I was like, yep, I'll do it. You know, so it was a lot of that. You know, when luck meets opportunity and just being prepared to say yes to stuff.
So what does the future hold for Mike Finnegan?
Well, that's the great thing. I don't really plan for any of that. So I never have. Like I know what I'm doing tomorrow and the next day. And after that, I'll just figure it out. You know? I got a wife who's way smarter than me, and she'll make sure the house doesn't burn down or whatever. But yeah, I've never been a big planner. It's always, here's the next thing I want to do, and when we're done with that, we'll figure out whatever the next thing is. You know, it's worked pretty well for me. I don't recommend it. It's probably like my dad. My dad asked me the same question you just asked me, but he would ask me 2 or 3 times a year, and I same thing. I'm like, Dad, I don't know. You know?
I'll get through Thursday and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah. I'm like, I got this next thing I want to go to, and I need to build this car to get to that thing. But once that thing's over, we'll you know, figure out what the next thing is. Yeah.
So for those on YouTube, you see his truck sitting behind him. So tell us the story on how this truck became what it is, because it was in a paint booth at SEMA last year.
It was in a detailing booth called
yeah, that's right.
Bling Sauce. Yeah. This truck was so I broke my leg going snowboarding. When was that? Last February.
That right there is why I don't snowboard.
Oh, I love snowboarding. It's the first injury, like real injury I've had in 30 years of snowboarding. I broke my leg. And so I was stuck on the couch. Most of the vehicles I have are stick shift, and I was stuck on the couch, just bored with a busted leg. And so I'm doing what I probably shouldn't be doing, which is car shopping on the internet. And there's a really good Facebook group called the Street Machinery Sales and Service.
Yep.
And I'm on there, and this guy, Jonathan McCandless, has this truck for sale. And it's a V6. I'll move out of the way. It's a V6 98 GMC, and it had, I think, 12,000 miles on it. And this particular shade of blue only looks good outdoors in the sun. But in the sun, it's one of my favorite colors. And I was like, it's in Texas. I could fly to Texas, pick up the truck from my buddy Alan, road trip over here, go see the movie Rad, which is going to get re-released in the theaters, hang out with some people, and then road trip at home. And that was as far as my plan was. And so that's what I did. I got on my crutches, went to the airport, flew to Texas, bought the truck, went and saw the movie Rad in movie theaters, which was super fun. Traded some T-shirts for cassette tapes because it's got a working cassette deck in it, and then I had a box of like 30 tapes and just listened to them all the way home to Georgia, and I made a YouTube episode about it. And then once I got home, my buddies from Blank Sauce had seen the truck, and they were like, "Let's put it in our SEMA booth. You fix it up." And I was like, like it's not really SEMA quality. Like, it's really low miles, but it had a little bit of a hard life. It had a lot of scratches and it had quite a few dents in it. And I said, but I think maybe we can save the paint. We'll see. So I called a local PDR guy and he got every dent out of it, which was wild. And then I called my buddy Derek, who's got a body shop here in town. And he rubbed on this thing to where I was like, yeah, you could put this under the lights of SEMA and it's not perfect, but it looks pretty damn good. And so we ended up making YouTube episodes about converting it to 4-wheel coilovers all the way around. It's got a full ride tech suspension on it. And then we did a LS swap with a Gearstar 6L90, 6-speed behind it. We did a hair-up blower on it. It's probably going to make 800 or 900 once we actually, take it to a dyno and find that out. But
which is crazy for a rear wheel drive truck.
Oh, it's utterly useless. Like this truck is on crash every time I drive it. Like if you're doing 50 and you stab it, the truck will turn sideways. It's got the smallest pulley on it you could put on it. It doesn't need it. And what I love about it, I changed the grill, but it's a work truck. So it's got a rubber floor, cloth seats, crank windows. There's no options in this thing. So we sprayed a bed liner in it, changed the grill, and just, other than lowering it and doing, the drivetrain, I don't feel bad about driving this thing around. And if it gets rock chips, who cares? It's not a shaved, bagged, body dropped show truck. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just wasn't what I wanted. I wanted something fast, but that I wouldn't mind driving around if something went wrong, So it now has 13,000, almost 14,000 miles on it. And what I liked about that was I didn't have to restore the interior. Like it went to SEMA, the interior is totally stock.
Oh, wow.
And people were tripping on it. They're like, it's got a rubber floor mat, But then when they see how few miles are on it and how nice it is, like it's like a time capsule inside. There's no wind noise when you drive it. There's no squeaks. There's no rattles. The tape deck works. I think that was most people's favorite thing was I had a pile of cassette tapes on the seat and people were tripping like that it had cassettes in it,
Kids nowadays would be like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, and cassettes suck, but the thing I like about them is you got to be so paranoid about them that you can't skip or forward or reverse because you might break the tape.
Yeah.
So you're kind of forced to listen to every song on whatever that album is. You just pop it in and go, and whatever happens, happens. And you got about a 50% success ratio. I'm constantly putting in tapes that don't work, throw them away. All right, grab another one, But I'll go on these road trips and I'll bring FSM shirts and I'll just tell people, hey, I'm going to be in this parking lot tonight. Steal your parents' cassettes, bring them to me and I'll trade you, So I probably have 500 cassettes, So it's a super fun way just to meet people.
I don't think I've listened to a cassette in 30 years, probably.
There's no good reason to unless you own something that has a tape deck in it. It works. It's purely for fun. There's no good. It doesn't sound great. Although I had a ramp truck that had a really good system in it, and Zapco makes this Bluetooth signal processor that you can use high level inputs from like speaker outputs from your stereo into it, but you can also Bluetooth from your phone. So my ramp truck had a cassette deck in it and it still works. So I would play cassettes and this thing would thump. It sounded so good, but then I could also stream music from my phone. So it was pretty much the best of both worlds. And that's probably what I'll do to this is it needs bass really bad, but I'll leave the tape deck in it for sure.
They'll be like, what's that crackle noise coming through your speakers? Like, no, that's not the speakers. That's just the tape.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Keep you a pencil in the console to find the tape back in when it comes out.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, man, it was good catching up with you, trying to see where you've been and what you've done and where you're going. So, tell people how they do find you now that you're doing your own thing.
Oh yeah, you guys can find me on YouTube at Finnegan's Garage, on Instagram at Finnegan999, and on Facebook at Mike Finnegan News. Those are the best
What
ways to keep up with me.
what's the 999?
It's been my racing number.
Okay.
My whole adult life, that's just been on everything, every car, truck, boat that I've drag raced.
So you're still gonna travel and do the events and stuff like you did on Roadkill. You're just gonna do it all for yourself now.
Yeah, like I have some twisted ideas that we never got to do on Roadkill, and now there's no one to tell me no, so we're just gonna go do them. Got to drum up some sponsors for some of the more ambitious ones. Like we just did an event called Sick Week, and it's a 5-day road rally with drag racing. And so we're making a movie about it. It's about 7 hours long. We're going to break it up into 5 videos, and then drop the whole thing in one chunk for people who are nuts and want to sit down for 7 hours. But
now that's people, they'll take actual drag cars and drive them from track to track, right?
Yeah. So like, I'll turn this so you guys can see it. So there's my 57 Chevy or 55 Chevy that we built on Roadkill. That car is street legal, it's registered, it's insured, and I will take my kids to school in that car. Well, there's events now for people who want to drive something fast on the street and prove that it's an actual street car. So what makes these events unique is that you'll drag race at one track, but then you road trip to another one hundreds of miles away, bringing everything you need with you to survive. If the car breaks down, you fix it. You can't put it on a tow truck. You would get disqualified. And so you'll race for 5 days at 4 different tracks. And at the end, they'll average up your elapsed time at each track, and the lowest average will win their class.
Oh, wow.
And so I race a nostalgia class called A-Gas, and it's for cars like that look like they were built in the 1960s. And so this is what's called a gasser style car. And it looks like it was built in the 1960s, except it's got modern electronic fuel injection and a 6-speed manual trans to make driving on the highway better.
Yeah.
But that car, we've been 160 miles an hour in the quarter mile with it. And we just drove almost 1,000 miles with it last week for this event called Sick Week. And we filmed the whole thing. I got sponsors, Bling Sauce, Mickey Thompson Tires, BP Manufacturing. I brought those guys in to help fund an actual documentary style movie about this. So we had 4 camera people and a drone operator and an audio guy and like professional level stuff. Basically the people that all got laid off from Roadkill came and helped me make this movie.
That was my next question. If you brought those people over with you.
Oh, absolutely. Like the people that all lost their jobs are some of the best there are at making automotive content. And so they, not all of them had a side hustle like I did, like, being on YouTube. And so whenever I can, my goal now is like, I don't want a Ferrari. I just want to keep going on adventures, And so if I can somehow find a way to fund adventures and keep making them on YouTube and keep my friends employed and everybody happy and healthy, and that's all I need, man. I'm happy.
Well, like I said, as long as you can get through Thursday, and then you'll figure out what's after that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, like I said, I appreciate you coming on, man. I've been trying to link up with a lot of the previous editors and stuff for the magazines that kind of, let me do what I did over the last, 24 years.
Yeah.
So just let me still be able to shoot and write and stuff for some cool people. So if it wasn't for you editors back in the day like that, use my stuff, then I don't know where I'd be at right now. So,
well, none of us wants a real job. So as long as we keep helping each other avoid that, then we're all doing great.
I had that job for years. I left Pepsi after 22 years of 50, 60, 70 hours a week and then being gone every weekend for shows. And I'm like, I'm gonna do something on my own full time like this, and it's worked out. So
awesome.
I just wish I would have done it sooner now.
Oh, I think we all wish the same thing, but I don't know, man. I think the future is bright for you and everyone else that's still making content. So
Almost like here I say every year, I'm not building another SEMA vehicle, and here I am building the number 10. So,
oh wow, yeah, the SEMA crunch, it's a real thing.
yeah, we're already started, already got parts coming. I don't play that. Let's put parts on once we get to Vegas. I don't play that game. I'd rather have it done where we can beat on it and then have it there. So,
I mean, that's a great thing if you can make it happen. I've never been able to, but those of you that can, congratulations.
well, I tend to start for SEMA while I'm at SEMA the year before. So,
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
You start
okay.
shopping for parts and figuring out what you need and get ideas and photos. So then once you get home, middle of November, you can go, all right, let's start this.
Oh, I'll try that.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. And it was good chatting with you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, Brandon.